I think that's really the only reason that you see the same people kind of floating around it. There just isn't that many people that are, you know, highly specialized in this field. I think I could probably name 10 people that do remote viewing professionally. There's probably more,
Well,
but I've only seen maybe that many.
well, here's my next question. Lou's book comes out, right? He tells the world that, because, okay, I'm going to tell you a story. Jeremy told me, right? And this was when he was on the podcast. So anyone can go back and watch it. Um, Basically, he told me that he was, when Lou was filming Unidentified, that was the show that he did when he was part of To the Stars Academy. They got in touch with Jeremy because Jeremy had an experience in the desert of, like, I think it was Turkey, just desolate. And they were guarding a box. They didn't know what was in the box, but it was this huge wooden crate. And they were told not to get near it, don't open it. You know, if anyone approaches it, shoot them on sight. And they just didn't know what the hell that they were doing. And a craft, or what seemed to be a craft, came over them, him and his partner, that night. And that's what sparked his interest in UFOs. And he later found out that what was most likely in the crate was some sort of they intercepted a piece of a nuclear weapon, because you can't ship the whole nuclear weapon. You got to ship it in parts, right? So because that's how bad, state actors do things. They can't,
Yeah.
like the bad actors, you can't just ship a nuclear weapon, across state borders. It's not how it works. So,
Yeah.
the U.S. intercepted a piece of it, and
Yeah.
that's what was in the crate. Jeremy suspects. So yada yada yada. Jeremy ends up contacting Unidentified. He gets on the show. He ends up becoming friends with Lou, and then sees behind the curtain. What Jeremy says is that Lou is full of shit. That he is making it all up. Yada yada. That Jeremy doesn't really believe anything that Lou says. There was a lot of false promises made. There was a lot of tomfoolery, if you will. So Jeremy, I think, has an axe to grind with Lou, which I think could cloud his judgment a bit. But we've seen in the UFO community how being at the top like this can affect you. Look at what happened with, like, Stephen Greer, right?
Yeah.
Who started off as what I would say is purely intent. Like, he had pure intentions in the beginning.
Yeah.
So it's not fair to say that people don't become money hungry.
Well,
I
I
don't know
mean,
if that's the
when you
word.
have a lot of attention on you too, like it
I hate to
happens
say
in music as well. You know, if when somebody gets famous all of a sudden, you see people get famous and then go on ego trips and so forth pretty regularly all over the place. That's certainly not unique to UFO world. Um,
right.
so
Well, he
and I
told
mean,
me.
I don't know much about that with Lou particularly, so I couldn't really say much. But I know I saw some stuff about he made some predictions that didn't come true or whatever, and that happens all the time. In remote viewing, you get it's like baseball. You don't bat 1,000. Nobody bats 1,000. Sometimes you'll strike out. Sometimes you'll hit a home run. A lot of the time, you'll be somewhere in between. Um, but
I agree.
yeah,
I agree. I agree. But so essentially, he broke down, because once he was in the inner circle, this is Jeremy I'm speaking of, um, he said that Sean Cahill and Lou were basically like, it was like this whole facade, that Sean, on the ride to Lou's house, because they decided not to fly, they drove from, wherever to wherever, but it took multiple days. So Sean asked him some probing questions in the car just as they were getting to know each other. And then Jeremy thinks that Sean passed that information to Lou because once they got to Lou's house, Lou started predicting Jeremy's future.
Okay.
And it included some of the information that he had provided to Sean. But what Sean didn't know was that Jeremy had an ex-wife as well. So I'm not going to get into the full story, but like there was a lot of things wrong. But that could have been frontal loading. Front loading.
Yeah.
That's what that could be. Is
Yep.
A front, like we've talked about in our own sessions that we've done together. So again, like now, back then when I talked to Jeremy, I was a little bit more like I had my line in the sand, and maybe remote viewing was a bit over that line, but now my line has moved up. So I'm kind of thinking of it from a different aspect. Could they have been trying to impress Jeremy? Sean front loaded Lou. Lou did his thing, got a couple things right, a couple things wrong, but just enough for Jeremy to be like, it's all bullshit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's tough. Like I know you look at what's his name there? Super famous Israeli guy, psychic. Why can't I think of his name?
So there's Ingo Swan. There's I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Yapping.
Why is this
sickness brain? Uri Geller.
Mornings or Uri Geller?
Uri Geller. Yeah. So like he was a performative psychic, and I get he had been called out for faking it on occasion, right? And I mean that's why I don't like doing like performative psychic stuff. I've done it, and I will do it, but it's like sometimes you miss. You're taking a risk if you're gonna try and do something like that, right? And if you're good at pressure, like I've done okay on when I've attempted live remote viewing stuff, and I think it's because I am a performer. Like I've been performing on stages since I was a teenager, so I feel like maybe it doesn't bother me as much. But again, like I prefer to kind of just work one-on-one with people, or do my stuff in the background and then like totally blind, and then send it off to people, and then have them kind of come back to me and say, okay, dig deeper on element X or Y or whatever. Just because it's like putting yourself in a high stress position to be performative. And just the nature of psychic phenomenon itself it's such a subtle thing. It's all subconscious, and it's all energy stuff. And if you put too many parameters around it, it can be, particularly parameters that are rooted in sort of these ego type need to prove something, like if I'm or a good example would be, if I'm doing associative remote viewing, which is, again, you're trying to get a 50-50 choice and get it right more than 50% of the time, or as much as possible, really, which is what people use remote viewing to do, like gambling on sports bets and stuff like that. So if you have this sort of ego-based need to be right, you're going to screw it up a lot of the time. You might displace and like read the wrong target, which actually happened to me the other day, or you might just completely botch the session and get nothing useful. But it's tough. Like it's interesting. Like the military program, they had obviously pressure because they knew they were doing operational targets, but I think for the most part they were either blind or double blind. And if you approach it from sort of a method where it's like a practice and you're just doing it, and it's not if you can remove any of that external pressure, it seems to work a lot better.
Yeah. And so say Elizondo's book comes out. It's obviously going to be a major success because everyone in the community is going to be reading it. But do you think that this could end up, regardless, being a positive thing for phenomena like RV because it would lend major exposure to it in the modern day.
Yeah, it could. I mean, it already sort of is. Like people are talking about it. We're talking about it right now.
Yeah,
I think more people should talk about this subject. I find it absolutely fascinating. It's, been one of the most interesting things I've ever discovered in my life as far as topics of discussion and exploration. So,
right.
yeah,
And
I think it would be. I think it's anybody who's talking about remote viewing and taking it seriously is a positive thing.
what happens when everybody learns that they can be a remote viewer?
Well, I mean, I'd love for everybody to learn remote viewing.
What if
it
we
would,
start viewing the moon, Mars, everyone, every day, all day? What happens?
I don't know what would happen. The thing about it is it seems to be kind of like a psychedelic experience. Like it tends to open you up and sort of change your worldview a lot. And I think that's maybe why it hasn't taken off more, is that like it's kind of an uncomfortable thing to learn how to do, because particularly if you don't believe in it at first, and then you dive into it and you're presented with this information that's contrary to your belief system, that can kind of shatter your reality box, or stretch it a bit at least, and that can be uncomfortable for people. It was uncomfortable for me at certain points, but I forged through the discomfort and kept going because my fascination outweighed my discomfort, and I think that was a beneficial thing for me to do, because now I'm pretty good at it and I use it. Just on the other side of that discomfort is that innate psychic ability that you can then sort of just have running in the background. And this is like if you do some proper training and you work at it for a while. It's not going to happen on day one, but if you put it, I when I started, I went super hard for like 2 months, and at the end of those 2 months, I felt like my intuition was sharper. Like I was just, and in the years that preceded, I kept doing it. I wasn't doing it every day or anything after that, but it's it's a tough thing. It's like you need to pace yourself. You need to rest your mind, especially when you kind of shatter yourself with this, because like that's the thing. Like, and in Jeremy's article, he talks about, oh well, they fostered belief. Well, they tried to get them to believe that it was real. It's like, well, there's actually statistical data that shows that there's something like a 5% buff if you believe in this stuff, like the placebo effect, for example. That's, everybody knows the placebo effect. That's the medical equivalent of this. But there's a great book which I actually have right here, called Real Magic by Dean Radin, from the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And I thought maybe I'd open right to the right page. That happens sometimes. But he goes through some research that he did where they had people try remote viewing exercises, and
so just normal, never done it before people.
Yeah, but they categorized the groups with people who believed in psychic phenomenon and people who didn't. And the people who already believed did better by, again, like 5%. So, that's, and I think they had, like, it was a pretty good amount of trials that they did. Like, it was a statistically significant result. And Dean Radin's a proper scientist. He doesn't screw around. And he's a remote viewer, and
well,
he knows how all this stuff works.
So let me pose a thought to you. Let's say LUE is still working for the government to some degree. Could this book be part of some larger grand scheme for a slow drip disclosure and pushing it forward? I mean, you think about all the interviews Elizondo did up until about a year and a half ago, I would say, and then just completely went off the map.